Hi, I'm Patty Eckman.
And I'm Allen Eckman.
And this is Prairie Edge Hunt. Prairie Edge Hunt is our fourth in a series of large commission pieces we created for Prairie Edge Fine Art Gallery in Rapid City, South Dakota. The women and children of this family are caught in the melee of a buffalo hunt. All four pieces tell the story of a Lakota family living on the prairie near the Black Hills. The buffalo bulls rush by the protective cove as the hunters pursue them.
And the hunters above use the cliff as a buffalo jump.
This is a very effective way for hunters to supply the whole village with buffalo meat.
The falling buffalo can easily crush anyone below.
Little Bear runs to the safety of her grandmother as her mother protects her baby brother from falling rocks. Her sister, Little Flower, encourages her to run.
This big bull narrowly misses Little Bear. The Indians would pile rocks and place a buffalo skull on top in prayer to attract the buffalo. A magpie sitting on a rock is startled by the hunters going by.
A few misplaced arrows can mean the end for this hunter.
And that's the story of Prairie Edge Hunt.
Amen.
Amen.
Man, I can't believe it's done, Pop.
Man, I can't believe it's done, Pop. Yes, this is Prairie Edge Hunt. 11 months in the making. Now, our process is called the Eckman method of cast paper sculpture. It's a little bit different than any other sculpture you've ever seen in the world, because we're the only artists in the world doing work like this. We're Patty and Allen Eckman. This is Prairie Edge Hunt. We just finished it. We spent 32 hours videotaping the progress of this piece, and we're going to show you how we did it every step of the way.
Okay.
Okay.
We're going to show you all four large format pieces that we created for Prairie Edge Fine Art Gallery here in Rapid City, South Dakota. The first, completed in 1994, we called The Chief and His Clan. Each piece measures 7.5 feet wide, 5 feet high, and 20 inches in relief. The second piece we titled Prairie Edge Encampment. Prairie Edge Powwow was the third.
These previous three were all quarter life size, but for Prairie Edge Hunt we went to a 6 life size because buffalo just get to be so big. And this is the sketch that Prairie Edge approved in September of 2008 to do this commission. We use it as a guide throughout the execution of this piece. This is one of the sketches that I use to scale all of my figures. This is a child, a small child, 4.5 heads high. I proportion these sketches for templates to actually sculpt from. And this is a buffalo. For the humans, I do the front and the profile, but for the buffaloes, I just do the side and the 4 legs. Here is the layout that I used to print on my large format printer to make the templates for my sculptures. This is a bronze that I did. This is the scale. This is 1/6 life size. It's called Taking the Bull with the Bow. I'll use the skull and the buffalo, the horse a couple of times, and the rider in Prairie Edge Hunt. we'll cast these molds with our pulp and finish them. He's taking the bull with the bow, not the rifle. Okay, here we're printing out our templates for Prairie Edge Hunt. A large format printer. Now I took these sketches and I mounted them to the board. Then I cut the board out with my coping saw. For the buffalo, I mounted the sketches on board that's laminated mat board and acid-free foam board before I cut them out on my coping saw. I did 4 different buffalo. I can do 2-year-old bulls, cows, a yearling, and calves from these original sculptures. And here's my cutout template. This is what I'll do with my buffalo and my human figures. This adult woman, as well as all of the other humans, I mounted to our board so I could sculpt them out in paper. There's the buffalo and the figures there. I'll have to put everything together with glue. Here I used some 1/8 inch wood, sketching in the dimension on the buffalo, and here I'm going to do the hoof, and I'm going to draw a template that I can use for all 4 hoofs on the buffalo. Cut it out and then trace around it. This is a pattern here, my original template, but I'll use this too, and I'll do this on all 4 buffalo. So each buffalo will have its own set of hoofs. I take the template, lay it down on my board, and trace around it 3 more times. Then I'll cut those out. This is the large sculpture. It's going to be the bull, the 2-year-old bull. So we have 4 buffalo and 3 figures, and there's going to be a 4th figure. It's going to be an infant that Patty will sculpt in clay. They're all 1/6 life size in scale with one another: a calf, a yearling, a cow, and a 2-year-old bull. From here, I'm going to use some insulation foam to build them out a little bit before I sculpt on top of that with paper and or clay. I'm going to execute the buffalo with our paper on top of this foam after I trim it out, and the figures I'm going to do in paper. This is kind of gooey stuff, and it kind of drips a little bit, as you can see. Lost a little off the cow there, but that's okay. It's just a means to an end. They look a little lumpy, so I'm going to have to trim some of this off, but it does give me some strength, and it also little dimension before I go on top of it. I have to trim all this excess foam off of all of my sculptures before I go on top of that with my sculpting material. All the buffalo and all the figures. Doesn't take very long to do that, but here I'm adding our paper to the buffalo. This will add a lot more strength. I'm going to cover this completely with our paper before I add the clay, which will add about as much detail as I want to get on these original sculptures before I mold them. I'm using our paper pulp and our sheet paper, covered foam, and here's the buffalo drying. I'll do this with all my sculptures. Before we got too far along on these buffalo, we decided to go out to the 777 Buffalo Ranch just south of Rapid City and check out what the herd looks like up close and to see what they do. This was sort of a roundup. We went out on ATVs with the foreman of the ranch. Those are 3 bulls there, 2-year-old bulls. There's about 1,600 head here, and buffalo in a herd this size really have a herd mentality, and that's what we wanted to observe. We wanted to see what they did. Give us a little idea of what a buffalo hunt would look like and how the animals would behave. They really have a herd mentality. I've seen a few buffalo on some small ranches that have just a few head. They really act differently. Here's Patty in the ATV chasing the buffalo. We wanted to get a lot of pictures as well as some video so we could see what they look like when they're running and being chased. And really, we wanted to get pictures of their eyes because they have terror in their eyes. They're a wild animal, and when they're being chased, they're really, or pinned up, as you'll see later on, they're really afraid. It's hard to get close to them this way. We can zoom in with our cameras, but still it's not like being right beside them. To get some good pictures, you gotta be up real close. I'm getting pictures of buffalo.
Can I have a ride?
Yeah, you can have a ride. Start over here and pan them, but you don't want to get the bar right there.
Can I turn it on?
Go ahead. We're going to be a part of rounding up this herd and getting them into pens where the cows can be inoculated. You have to assume that each cow has a calf, and it's really for their own health that the ranchers will do this. Here's where I can get pictures up close. I was only about a foot away, when I took the pictures of their eyes. The terror. It's just amazing to see these animals in their eyes. Terror. The pictures we got out there at the 777 Ranch are very helpful to us, and not just sculpting these original sculptures for the molds, but when we get into our altered cast. Altered cast is a technique we've developed, and I'll get into that later. But here I'm claying these sculptures out, add a little more form and detail to them, in clay on top of that paper. This gives the sculpture a little more weight, but underneath there's a lot of strength. And you can see the pictures there that we took out at the 777 Buffalo Ranch. Got up close, get those pictures of the eyes, wanted to get those right. And the finished sculptures, they are being hunted, and that fear in their eyes needs to be there. Here's the 4 buffalo ready for the mold. I'm going to spray a little lacquer on these original sculptures to make the clay hard before I mold them. And here is one of the figures. This is the adult woman, and you can see I'm going right over top of the board and foam with our paper like I did the buffalo, but I'm not going to clay these. I'm going to sculpt these completely in our paper before I mold them, and add some detail on the face, probably more than I need to. You can see she doesn't have her arms on, so I'll need to put those on. I've sculpted those separately with the hands, and I'm going to put those on right now. I'll just attach them with pins before I fill in around them with our paper. This is the way we sculpt, is using that paper kind of like clay, and when it dries, it's hard and it's permanent and it's acid free, and it really does kind of fuse in rather than glue on. It's not paper mache. This is our paper that we make, and it's all acid free. And you can see that it's sort of an anatomical position that I've placed this human figure in. I'm going to, before I mold it, I'm going to take the hands off at the wrist. I've just found over the years with our method, this is a smart thing to do. I'll take and cut them both off same place. I just register one over the other here, and cut the other hand off. This is a little bit out of the box for sculptors, but this is the way we do it. And there's the figure, and I'll do that with each one. I can take that hand, and I can, after I've got it off, I can go ahead and add a little more definition and form and detail to it before I mold that. And there's all 3 figures. The infant Patty will do in clay. I'm covering them, giving them a coat of acrylic here, which protects them like the buffalo surface where I sprayed it with lacquer. This is called a layup for the mold, and you can see I've got kind of a wall built around the half of that buffalo, and I'm going to add a little more spray just to that clay that I added. I've got to do that with all my buffalo. I've laid up all 4 of them, and I'm going to mold them all at the same time. Because the molding compound is like a syrup, I've built a wall up around them all. Take the loose bristles off this brush, and I pour this pink molding material, which is called Smooth On, over my original sculpture. Now that wall keeps it from running off my sculpture. After this coat sets up, I'll do it again, and I'll put cheesecloth on the second coat, which I'm applying here. There's the cheesecloth. Now that adds strength when I demold, because I don't want this silicone rubber mold to tear, because I'm going to use this mold over and over and over again. Here's my third coat. Now I have to add what's called a mother mold. This is a hard mold. Now this compound is like a plastic when it sets up, and I'm smoothing it there. When it's dry, I turn it over, and there's my layup, which I will remove and lay up this side. Apply some Vaseline to the rubber there, because that'll give it a barrier. I don't want rubber to stick to rubber. And then I have to do the same with my human figures. You can see the top in that little box is the infant that Patty sculpted in clay, and now I'm pouring the silicone rubber on top of all of these figures, the hands and the ears in their own little layups. And this molding process is very labor intensive, and you have to be very careful on how to do this. Here I'm demolding the buffalo, taking off the mother mold and the rubber. And that way the sculpture stays intact for what, I don't know. The Vaseline enables us to separate them. Places a barrier between the two sections of rubber. These tight areas between the legs, that can be a problem area. And here on the smaller ones especially, because it can tear, especially if you don't get enough Vaseline in there. But there's the mold. The rubber fits right in on that mother mold. Here I placed the head back on the infant that Patty sculpted, because it's clay. Head came off, which is typical of what happens with clay sculpture. Here are all my molds, all trimmed out, ready for casting. Open them up. Patty's going to do all the casting on these buffalo and human figures. She's taking our pulp and filling the molds. Now, she has to do all 6 sides, because the buffalo has 6 molds to it. The 2 sides, and then the inside of each of the 4 legs. We call these starter casts. All the buffalo will be cast more than once, and the woman will be cast twice. Here Patty's casting the hands and the ears on a child. On the drying rack there's a 6 life-size man and horse that I molded a long time ago, and large buffalo bull there, and all the new molds that I just finished. And here's what the starter casts look like after they come out of the molds. We have pioneered a process we call altered cast. It's the way we teach, and what we call our way of teaching is the Eckman method of cast paper sculpture. We'll trim these casts out and then we'll register them together. Here we're using screws, and we'll do the same with the buffalo. Trim out the casts. You see the inside of the leg there, registering that together, and I'm trimming the excess off the cast, which is paper we can repulp, and registering the cast together with sheetrock screws. I use different sizes of sheetrock screws. They don't rust if they should get wet. And then we will make those casts seamless by putting strips of our paper, the soft paper, and chasing those over all the seams. And there are all the casts before they're posed, except for taking the bull with a bow cast that you see there. And then we'll cut these casts strategically and pose that figure. This is what I call altered casts, and we fill and cover those cuts with our paper. This creates what I call an articulated armature, where we can take this sculpture now, which is an original, dry it, and then add detail on top of that. And here's another buffalo, and you can see how segmented this can get. I'm cutting to pose another hoof right here. To get the pose that I want, I'm always looking at that sketch that I did for Prairie Edge to sort of match the poses with what is in that sketch. This is another pose. So you can see why we posed that original sculpture for the mold so simply, because we can do this over and over again with starter casts. Here I've taken this posed buffalo and I'm attaching an acrylic base to it. I like to use these acrylic bases for 3 different reasons, but I'll get into that later. It does help me to work on it and to stay in place while it's drying. Here's another horse. You can see I've got to fill that, and this is another rider on cast horse from Taking the Bull with a Bow, and this is one of 2 buffalo calf casts that I'm doing. We casted that calf mold twice because we have 2 little calves in this, and I'm each one posing a little differently. Like I said, this way of sculpting is a little bit out of the box, and it probably looks a little strange to professional sculptors who work in clay, but this has a lot of advantages, this process that we use, and it's taken us over 20 years, and actually we're still learning, but a big part of the success in this medium is the paper and the way we make that. We make it hard and soft. We make it thick and thin. We can make it very thick board, and I'll show you some of that later. But there's a calf. You see I use pins and screws. This starter cast is from a mold that I did a long time ago of a 6 life-size horse. That's a pose that I'm going to use that I'm looking at a book at running horses at a gallop, and I'm posing it according to that photograph that I just showed you from the book and doing all my cuts and filling those. And this is why we call it altered cast. Where I ended up with the articulated armature, and there in the top left is the starter cast. Quite a difference. And do the same with the figures. Cutting along the joints and muscle lines, I completely repose that figure and sculpt on top of it. And when it's wet like this, I can bend that neck up, and there's another woman that we casted her twice in that mold, and one of the children. And you see, these cuts are pretty simple, and the bends are pretty simple because it's a simple pose. Where this is a little more complicated, and it takes some experience and some anatomical knowledge to do this, but it sure is a lot of fun, and the results are great. There's an articulated armature of one of the riders, and he's on the posed cast from the horse from taking the bull with the bow. And here's another horse, and I'm taking this articulated armature and I'm cutting the legs off. The reason I do this is because I feel like it's a lot easier. You can see I got holes, it's hollow there, where I can reattach them, but it's a lot easier for me to sculpt a posed leg by itself than a posed leg around three other legs, body and head of a horse. I just like to get in there and sculpt a leg as a sculpture. I cut all four bottoms of the hoofs from our hard paper, and I fill in around it because the paper doesn't really cast well like wax does in a bronze mold. But that's okay, because we go over every square inch of that starter cast with this process and change it all to create a one-of-a-kind sculpture. The bonding agent melts the paper and works like clay in this process. And these four legs, the bottom one is still rough, still have to be sculpted, and the top one is ready for drying. And the same with the back legs underneath. And here I'm drying the horse legs and some buffalo legs. Looks a little funny, but when they're dry I can get in there and really burnish them hard and wet it and burnish it some more and really shape it, finish shaping it before I reattach the legs. And to do that, because I have holes, I can put a post in one and drop it right in the hole in the other and reattach those legs, and they're all done. And I can work on the body before and after I've done this. As you can see, I've done that with this buffalo. Attaching the legs, and then I can dry that and trim and add and subtract at will. And here you can see I'm dry burnishing a horse. I can get in there and smooth it. I can wet it with the bonding agent and smooth it some more. We don't like to put a lot of detail on our original molds for our starter cast because we can add all that later with more texture and detail than any other sculpture medium that I know of. I'm reattaching the finished leg on my horse now, and you can see I've got a hole there, and I wet that with our bonding agent, and I've got a post in my left hand. I wet the inside of the horse, the upper leg, put the post in, fill in around it. This will sort of glue it in place. From here, I will add it to the acrylic box. You can see I've got an awl because it's only on 2 legs stuck into the back of the horse to give it a 3rd leg, and I'm taping that front leg in place till it dries. Now this is one of the casts from our 6 life-size man mold. It's an articulated armature that I'm finishing up on the torso, sculpting in the detail. And I still have to add the hands and ears to this man.
Here you can see me working on the details of the little girl called Little Bear. I'm braiding the hair right now. We can make the paper so strong that we can cut it with the paper cutter into thin strips, and it looks and feels just like hair. I'm making her braids right here. And I add the bonding agent at each end of the braid to hold it in place until it dries. Here I'm putting the details on the face. I try to get the expression just right. Sometimes I look at other children, and sometimes I just look at the paper and I imagine the face and what it should be doing. She's scared and running, and so I wanted to get that in her face. Now I'm working on the clothing. I add the bonding agent to one side of the clothing to make it soft and pliable. You can see I have the leather grain in her clothing. We can get that detail in the paper. We hand cut the fringe, put her braids on, and they're flying in the air. And that's just dried on her like that. And you can see me putting all the detail on. There she is, finished. I've added beads on her necklace. She's got a doll in her hands. She's got beads on her moccasins. And she's running.
These posed hands, you can see the veins in them, right and left hands. I attach those just like I would the legs on an animal. I sculpt it in and chase around it on this posed hunter. We're finishing these pieces together, and this is one of the riders with his accessories, bow and arrow. He's drawing the arrow from his quiver. You can see all the detail, mane on the horse and tail on the horse.
Here I'm working on the grandmother. I'm putting the hair on in place, giving her a do. I usually wait till the hair is completely dry on her, and then I position it. And she's got the other little sister, named her Little Flower, and I'm positioning them just right because they're going to be calling to Little Bear to come and get with them under the ledge to be protected. This is a buffalo that I'm working on. I'm putting the woolly fluff on this buffalo, and Alan's going to show you how we make that out of our own paper in a minute. I'm working on this buffalo that's one of the falling buffalo, and this bull is the one going under the horse of the rider in peril. Alan and I do things very differently. I put all the fluff on these animals by hand, and he does something completely different, and he'll show you that. We actually get the same results, but artists do things differently sometimes, and this is an example of the way we do things differently.
And here's how we make that woolly fluff for the buffalo. It's a technique we developed about 20 years ago. But the application is pretty simple. We just take the sculpture and coat it with our bonding agent and add the fluff to it, and then later we'll freeze that with an acrylic spray. It'll make it hard and permanent.
Here you can see that I'm working on the cradle board for the baby in the piece. This is a template that I use to trace on paper that I've made to feel and look like leather. I'm using the bonding agent to soften the paper so I can form it around the thick back pad the baby is placed against. We make board from our paper that's actually as hard as wood. These are the boards I'm burnishing to smooth and shape them, and they'll go on the back of the cradle board. I'll fashion the back with braces just like a real cradle board is made. I've folded in the top torn edge of the paper to form the hood of the cradle board, and I've burnished it so that there are no visible seams. I'm wetting the inside of the cradle board to get it ready for the baby. I've also added brass tacks to the boards on the back. Now I'm folding this around the baby and getting it ready for all the final details. You can see the laces, the decorative beads, the feathers, and there's a little beaded turtle amulet to represent long life for the baby. And this is the mother that I'm working on that's going to be holding that cradle board. She's in an animated pose because she's back under the ledge and she's protecting her head from falling rocks. One of the hardest things to do for me is to get that expression just right, and that's what I'm working on right here. I've finished the bottom of her dress and I've put her hands in place to hold that cradle board. The hair is usually the last thing that's finished on the piece. I've finished all the detail on her clothing, and now you can see I'm wetting the top part of her braids because she's got a fine fur wrap that goes around her braids to hold them in place. I'm putting the final touches on this braid right here, but you can see the face is still rough. What I do from here is I wet the face and I take my burnisher and I work it pretty hard. I burnish it until it's smooth.
And that paper gets as hard as wood. But when we wet the surface, the paper on top gets softer and we can burnish it hard. And that works like a wood carver's sandpaper on wood. And we can really get it smooth. Here's my bowl. You probably noticed when I did the original sculpture, I didn't put horns, ears, tail, any of that detail on the original sculptures because we add all that. She's got the ears in place, and we'll show you how to do those and the tail later, but she's added this tail to the hole that lines up with the backbone of that buffalo cow, and she's going to chase it in seamlessly. I'm attaching the legs to another horse. I still have to put the ears on, and he's got teeth in his mouth, that mouth open. Still have to finish the eyes. I just tear this paper off. Probably a medium thick sheet that I can chase over and make it seamless there where the leg's attached. And this is the rider for that horse. I've cut some fringe and I'm attaching the fringe to his war shirt. And wet it on both sides and bend it around his elbow. And there's the rider with the bull that's going underneath it, and all that detail on this rider you can see. He's a little bit in peril because that bull's coming under the horse. I'm sculpting the face on another one. I said we're doing these together, and we are in a sense, but sort of finish them one at a time. This rider doesn't have a war shirt, so I'm making a war shirt. But this war shirt is not going to be on that rider. He's realized that they've got the buffalo heading toward a jump, and in order to make himself bigger, he's pulled off his war shirt and he's waving it over his head, hurting those buffalo over that jump. Here I'm attaching the beads over the fringe and a beaded pattern on a bib that I created. Put a collar on the top of the war shirt where the neck hole is and fringe around this bib. The finished shirt's going to go in his hand here, and I've bent that shirt, wet it, bent it, got it kind of posed the way I want that shirt to be. And in order to get it in his hand, I have to open his hand, so I cut the thumb there, and it's going to be easy enough to close it after I have the shirt in there. So take that shirt, got it posed the way I want, it's dry, and then I can wet around there and chase over that thumb, and he's got his shirt in his hand now. This is a lance that goes in the hand of another rider that's got the buffalo heading for that jump. And you can see I'm making this detail very realistically. I find that sculpture often imitates reality, and the best way I know how to imitate reality is to make it real. So I try to do that. I'm using paper. It's all our paper, and it's hard paper there, but I've made the feathers, and there's the lance, and I've made the lance shaft. I've wrapped it around wire, and so I removed the wire and put the tassel in that hole in the back where the wire was. Now it's time to make the background for this piece, and we've cut a shape from laminated foam, and we're mounting the mounting plate inside that background shape. And then I make a superstructure where I can use foam board and silicone that down, and this is the base for my sculpture for the background. And I've cut more foam, and it's really foam that's been laminated with some acid-free mat board on top to create those shapes, more superstructure underneath to support the weight of the sculptures. And I've got some simple shapes, rectangles, and some that are cut that will become land. These are sort of trails that the riders and the buffalo are going to go down that shape. This looks like it's going to be pretty lightweight, but and it is considering, but it's going to have some weight to it when it's all done. And you can see I've made this little cove where I've put Patty's finished figures. Make sure they fit in there right, and I've kind of mounted them to little acrylic bases. Here I'm using our bonding agent on some thicker unpulped paper. This is an actual sheet of cotton linters that I've wet and use as a base before I laminate our soft paper. I've wrinkled it up a little bit to make it a little softer and to add some texture, and I cover that base coat with our paper, and I do that throughout, sculpt it in. I can pretty much do what I want here. I can add and subtract, fill in, I can change it, but it's going to be very, very strong when I'm finished. It's really more like wood than paper. And here I'm adding a text coat. I've repulped some hard paper, and I'm going to show you this a little later up close. There's taking the bull with the bow rider. I've got to give him a due and finish his accessories, but there's the horse. And I'm going to show you on this horse how we do the tail and the mane. I just take our cut hard paper, cut it thin, and add it starting tip of the tail, and I add it to the tail, putting it on kind of realistically, overlapping it, bringing it to the end. Here I'm kind of wetting those ends, and they mush in together, and I'll burnish that down with my burnisher. And there's the tail all finished. Now this slot where there's kind of a tuft piece of anatomy of that horse, it's on a horse, and I've got a slit in there, and what I do is I push those cut pieces of paper into that after I've wet it, and they'll fuse in there, and it looks like it's growing from his neck and head. And I'll give him a due, like we give all of our Indians a due. He's getting his due right now. He's going to have braids, and after I've got his hair on, I tie it up, pull it back where I will have it tight where the braid's going to go, and I can trim off that excess with a pair of scissors, and he'll have a finished do after I've added the braids. And there's taking the bull with the bow, and I sculpted the Sharp's carbine from our hard paper and all these other accessories. I didn't use any of the wax molds for the bronze for that. This is the tree that I'm going to make, and what I've done is taken some foam board and cut about halfway through it, and now I'm cutting some more foam board discs that will go inside. I will take some silicone, and I know where I've pre-measured my disc to my tree width, because it's wider at the bottom and narrow at the top, just like a tree. And pin those discs in and wrap that like a tube around those discs. Gives me a little something solid inside there, and I can tape it until that dries. Pin it, tape it, just get it together, and put a little more silicone right there on the end. Now I've got it dry, and I'll remove my fasteners, the tape and the pins, and take some of this medium thick paper and our bonding agent, and I'm going to wrap it right around that serrated foam board, which is the trunk of my tree. And then I'm going to do the top of the tree. It's in sections. I'm going to wrap this around, chase it down with my burnisher, and let it dry. Once it's dry, I can do a lot with it, as you'll see. And I'll put bark on this tree, but here I'm cutting it because I want it to bend. This tree, I've noticed in the Black Hills, and trees grow out of rock, and sometimes if there's a rock above a tree, when it starts, the tree wants to see light, and it'll bend around that rock. And that's what this tree did many moons ago, when this was a tree started from the pine cone of ponderosa pine. It started growing under a little ledge, and found that it needed to get a little more light, so it bent itself around that ledge. And I'll take these serrated parts and I'll fill those, and then I'll cover those bends with my paper and dry it. You can see I've got it kind of mounted there on a piece of foam board that's covered with package tape so nothing sticks. Here I'm tearing sort of triangles. These are going to be limbs. You give you a little idea how we do the tails on our buffalo and our horses when you see how we do a limb of a tree. And this is a technique that we use with wire, but I'm using, instead of wire, I'm going to use some ragboard that I've cut in about 1/16 inch strips, same thickness as ragboard. And I'm rolling the paper around that ragboard strip. It's all acid free. And I bend that limb any way I want. And if I want to make a thicker limb, then I just use thicker paper. But that ragboard stays in there, and when you bend it, it won't kink so much like it would if it didn't have anything in there. Like I said, we make a lot of posts and tubes using wire and brass tubes wrapped around paper to make different things, but this is how we make limbs. And those all dry, and then I can cut holes in my tree trunk and add those limbs wherever I want them. You can see I've kind of sculpted an end of the tree. I've made it hollow on the end. It's one of those trees that's been stressed with a lot of things, rocks that has to go around, and then because it's bent, and we get extreme weather in the Black Hills with snow and rain and wind. The end of it got broken off, which tops the trees often do here, and it's still alive. This is the bark. Now this is kind of like the fluff I did with the buffalo, only what I did was I left it on there and I sprayed it with the acrylic, and then I can tear pieces off and bark my tree out. I'm adding the limbs. I use little pieces that I attach to bigger limbs to make limbs, and tape them, chase around there. This looks like fringe, and it's made a lot like fringe, but this is not fringe. This is, guess what? Guess what this is? Can you tell yet? These are going to be pine needles. Kind of looks like pine needles to me. It's the way I think they grow. I see them all the time. This is how I make them. I take a hard piece of paper, fold it in half, cut it, and then I can open it up. Now I've got 2 strips that I can make into a little pine frond. And what I do is I take my paper that I've wrapped around a wire, and I wrap that cut pine needle around that paper, and then I add it to the tree, pin it, and then sculpt it in with the wet soft paper, and it looks like it's growing out. Here's kind of a technique that I learned many moons ago. This is an ear. This is how we make the ears to all our animals. Take a hard piece of paper. I actually fold it in half, so I doubled it and bend it. I shape it first like an ear, and fold it in there. It kind of has the anatomy of an ear, folded kind of around itself near the head, and sculpt it in, and it's detail that can't really mold very well, and it doesn't come out very well in a mold in paper, so we add it later. And this is one of the calves, and I add the tail just like we do the buffalo and the horse to the calf. And there's the other calf. You can see they're both posed differently. And there's those acrylic boxes, and I like to use those because of the weight, because they're clear. I can get a good picture of them when I set them on my photo stand and have a white board underneath. Light comes up from underneath, and they're clear also for mounting. I can see where to mount it easily. Now here I'm going to add the fluff to this little calf. He's got big eyes, cute little calf. Kind of makes you feel sorry for him because he gets run off the cliff. And that'll be veal. And his skin will make nice little leather purses. I'm gonna cry. This is the mold for the skull. It's the wax mold for taking the bull with a bow, and I'm gonna cast this twice. It's sheet casting, and I like to cast the buffalo skulls myself. I have several different molds, different scales. I'll dry it and take it out of the mold. We always use open molds for drying. Sometimes they're a little wet. You can see it's still a little wet right there, and I can kind of move that paper down a little bit and sculpt it there. Most of the time it's dry, and these are good and dry. So I'll put them together and finish them off. I'll have to cut the eyes out there. This is a magpie, and this is the 1/2-inch board that I was telling you about. It's hard as wood. I cut it out with a coping saw. We can make this as thick as we want it, this board. But for the magpie, I used a 1/2-inch because I can split it in half on this cutting board, because we need 2 magpies for Prairie Edge Hunt. I'm whittling it down a little bit here and shaping it. Then I'm going to give it to Patty to finish off.
I've taken the shapes that Allen cut out of the hard paper, and I've added our soft paper on top to sculpt the form of the body of the magpies. The beaks of the magpie are whittled out of the original hard paper and burnished to the right form. Now for the tail feathers. I cut a long strip out of our hard paper, and you can see right here I'm cutting the length of some of the tail feathers that I'm going to add on, and I cut the little detail of the feathers on each side, and then I'm carefully adding them one at a time to the tail. I usually look at books to see how many tail feathers they have and what the shape is, because every bird really is different. I sculpt each wing separately, starting with the covert feathers, which create the airfoil on the wing. The primary feathers, which make up the wing tip, overlap each other, and the secondary wing feathers that I'm adding here overlap the primary feathers, and they all fit in and under the shape of the coverts. And here I'm going to show you the finished wing. There's the finished wing. And now I start on the other side with the primary feathers of the other wing. I put pins in both sides of the body of the magpie as braces, so I can then add the wings and have them stabilized until they dry in place. Now, since I can't leave the pins in the bird and I need to stabilize those wings and make them a little stronger, I use chasing paper to fuse the top and the bottom of the wing to the body of the bird, just like I'm doing here. And then what I do is I add feathery detail with my burnisher to the body of the bird, and I also chase the tail feathers to the body of the bird so that you can't see the difference between the body and the feather. Here I'm adding the detail. I've got the eyes put in, and then I'm going to smooth the tail feathers where the tail feathers are attached to the body. I'm going to smooth that so you can't see the line. This is the second magpie with the wings down. Here I am attaching the tail feathers. Now I'm trying a piece of paper on here to get the shape of the foot. And here I've formed one of the little feet of the magpie. It's going to be perched on the side of a nest. And there I have the feet on. That's not actually very easy to do. They're tiny. Here he is finished, getting ready to fly off the side of a nest. And these are the feet that I've sculpted for the other magpie, which will be perched on a rock.
Now, this is how I make rocks. Big rocks, anyway. Acid-free foam board, and I coat a sheet of our thicker paper and bonding agent on both sides and kind of wrap it around that foam board, and there's a rock. It's simple to make. My daughter's made rocks for me. Of course, she was 17 when she made them, but any kid can make a rock this way. Just make sure you cover it good. Also, for smaller rocks, you can just do that with the thicker paper alone. After I've got them dried, I'm going to put this text coat on it. This is that repulped hard paper that I text coated the background with. And you can kind of sculpt little designs. I've noticed that this kind of texture is on the rocks here in the Black Hills, so I want to make sure I had that right. I have to put every sculpture on this background to make sure everything fits. You see the string there. This is board that I'll use as a permanent mount that will replace those acrylic boxes, and I'll screw those right on the bottom of each sculpture to place them temporarily behind the string, which is my relief string. Shows me how far I can come out on this sculpture, because it's got to fit in an acrylic box that is a specific size. And that's how I mount those. I'll just screw those on every sculpture from the bottom, from the side. And this is what Prairie Edge Hunt will look like when we're finished with it. Now, I've drawn around those mounts with a pencil line, and I know where the grass is going to go, because this is just a better way to do it, is to put everything on there and then put the grass on. You can see everything's in place there, pretty much. Little cove where the little family is hiding, and they're out harvesting prairie turnips and got caught in this melee, and the cove gives them a place to hide for protection. And all the sculptures are finished, all the components for Prairie Edge Hunt. I'm putting the rocks on permanently now. I'm going to use some of that text coat to fuse them in. It's going to be kind of like a gluing compound, but I can also sculpt with it because it is paper. And this is the grass. I've cut this grass longer than I need to, and I'll tear off sections of that, and I'll cut it shorter, dip the ends in the bonding agent, and place them on the background. And there it is. Everything's in place, ready for the sculptures. I even have the tree top there that fell off the end of the tree, and that's permanently in place. And now I'm ready to mount all the sculptures in place. I got a plate behind here. Now with the leftover limbs, I'm going to put roots on this tree hanging over the rocks. We left a lot of the original audio on this video so you can listen to us as we finish up this piece. And now Patty's going to do petroglyphs here.
From the book, I've taken actual Lakota designs, and I'm sculpting these in the side of the mountain, and they're going to be hidden behind the buffalo.
With the petroglyphs finished, we're ready to start mounting all the sculptures. The tree's in place, petroglyphs in place, because they'll be behind some of those sculptures. We've hidden other things in here like turtles and arrows and feathers. These are all the sculptures, and we put them all on in one night. They're all ready to go. This is the first rider. I'm going to put him on right now. With that in place, I'll go to the second rider, the one with the lance. In this mounting process, I leave a lot of mounts and screws exposed on the surface. Mom and the baby running side by side. Oh.
My job is to come along behind Allen and sculpt over all those elements, creating rocks and ground and grass.
I attached some of these falling buffalo together previously, and I'll put them in place right here. They go kind of like this. Although this looks like it's going pretty fast, it took hours for us to do this. You want to put your bird nest in?
Yeah, I do. After
With your bird? In some of this mounting, I actually had to go through some of our elements with screws, and I helped Patty cover some of that up.
Yeah. Only Chris would appreciate that.
Patty did just a great job with those little sculptures, the birds and the parfleche boxes. Natural looking. I'm thinking it looks really good. That's what I'm talking. I mean, that's how I dialogue.
That's how you dialogue, that's for sure.
And then these girls are here. Like that. So where do we put those parfleche stuff?
I'm really proud of them, so I want
Right here. Or up here. Figuring out where things go is one thing, but mounting them is another. And even though they're in a protective cove, they've got to be in there secure, because this could be shipped anywhere in the world. Well, go ahead and put a little in there, because this other little girl, she's got to go right here. Well, maybe I can stick her in now, and then you can see what you're going to do. Here's some pins, darling. I'm going to put a little text coat. to mount the magpie on a rock, I put the ends of dressmaker pins through the bottom of the magpie's feet and stuck them in a rock, and then I'll stick it down on the buffalo skull.
Little potlatch.
No, babe. Potlatch is the wrong tribe.
Yeah, I can't remember.
It's not an item, it's an event. Okay?
Okay. I know it is, but that's the only name I can remember.
Well, don't say it then.
Parfletch. Parfletch.
Box. Yeah, I think you gotta try to stick them on that nest somehow. Cute. Stick it down, darling. Let's get this show on the road.
What I've been trying to do all night long. Okay.
Oh man, I'm covering up my roots, the parflex box.
Hey! Get that guy's head out of the way. Too crowded right down there.
Should I move him back?
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna have to do something with his tail then.
Do something with his tail.
I want to get the other stuff. And this skull's going right here. Saying PE hunt is finished except for the signing. What do you think?
I think it is finished except for the signs.
Got a little bit of peepage coming on here. All right. Where do we sign it?
Right here.
I think it's right there. Okay, let's get a signing sheet.
I think so. After 11 months of hard work and 11 hours this last day of assembling the piece, we're finally finished. I got a sheet of our paper, we both signed it with pencil, and I burnished it on. What an accomplishment. Okay. Now, I thought there was one other place I was supposed to cover up.
Okay, get over here, Petruski. We're going to talk about this a little bit. This is our newest piece. Look there. This is our newest piece, Prairie Edge Hunt. We just finished it. And we spent 32 hours doing video of this piece, and we're going to show you how we did it.
Amen.
Amen.
Man, I can't believe it's done, Pop.
Patty and I are typically night owls, but this was a lot of work for one night. All this mounting was very tiring, as you could probably tell. Patty especially was tired. But I'm glad we did it, and it just turned out great. We're very proud of Prairie Edge Hunt.